It does me great pleasure to now introduce formally our wonderful guest co-host who is joined with us today. As we were preparing for the top of the hour, we were catching up. It's been quite some time since we have been able to talk live, but I have followed her career and she has followed mine and supported me. And so this is such a treat for me. And I'm so grateful that she said yes to our invite. But our co-host today is Dr. Tiffani Worthy. Dr. Tiffani Worthy is an authentic leader and combat veteran with a diverse background that spans over 20 years across various industries. The common thread in all that she does is building capacity for people and organizations to optimize their potential and to achieve their desired outcomes. Dr. Worthy's leadership experiences include serving as a U.S. Army officer and on executive leadership teams at the George Washington University, MC Dean, a premier electrical engineering firm, Day and Zimmerman, which is where the two of us met, a $2.5 billion engineering firm, and as an adjunct professor at Drexel University. Today, she owns Worthy Solutions, LLC, and provides thoughtful solutions to business challenges in the Philly metro and DC metro areas. And she also leads a nonprofit organization that she and her husband founded, and it is called All Things Are Possible, or ATAP, or ATAP. You'll have to let us know how in which you all refer to that foundation. And again, that's in Willingboro, New Jersey. In her community, Willingboro Township, Dr. Worthy was elected to serve on Willingboro's Township Council in 2020, and get this, and was unanimously selected by the council to serve as the mayor in January of 2020. So yes, we have a mayor that's among us today. Dr. Worthy holds a Bachelor of Science from the United States Military Academy, a Master of Arts in Human Resource Management from Webster University, and a Doctorate of Education in Human and Organizational Learning from the George Washington University. She is married to Pastor Carlos Worthy of the Borough Church and 3 children. So welcome, Dr. Worthy. We're so excited to have you here. As the audience probably is familiar, especially for those that are returning to the Intentional Conversations VodCast, one of our first questions is always to let our guest co-hosts to unmute themselves and to share in their own way information about themselves that we would not find in the bio. So we've given your accolades, but tell us your story. What do we not know about you from reading your bio? And welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. I'm so grateful to be here and humbled. I think that the way I would describe myself or introduce myself that you wouldn't get from the bio is a dancer at heart. And I say that because I did grow up in dance and dance professionally. And dancers are innovative, they're creative, yet they're precise and they're demanding. And so I think that it's important to, if we're talking about bringing our full selves and creating spaces where we can be who we are authentically, it's important to know that despite the fact I'm a combat veteran and people have stereotypes about that, and despite the fact I have an engineering degree, they have stereotypes about that, I think it's important to recognize I am a dancer at heart, and everything that goes along with it, I wear that proudly and share that love of performing arts with so many.
I love that. And let me just say, Dr. Worthy, you have broken so many of the stereotypes of what people would think about individuals that serve in different capacities. And I can't wait to unpack all of that. I was noticing the eyes of my colleague, Mark Travis Rivera, because he's also a dancer. So as you were talking about being a dancer at heart, his eyes were really just lighting up. And so, Mark, this one's for you, okay? This one's for you. But that is so fantastic. So I want to start with a really broad question, because I know this hour is going to go by fast. But as we think about all of your experiences, I want you just to talk a little bit about how each of those experiences have prepared you for the roles that you assume today. So take us a little bit on that journey and help us to understand how in which you bring all of those experience to work for you in all the different capacities in which you serve.
Yes, I think for me, I've had to do a lot of introspection to really understand, how did I get here? Is this where I intended to land? What else do I want to do? And if I go back, I'm pretty much the same old me that I've always been, always interested in learning, always interested in growing and interested in having a positive impact, not just for me, but for those who are around me. And so that theme of learning and lifelong learning and building capacity in myself and in others, I think is something that speaks to who I am from the beginning of my career as an Army second lieutenant through serving on executive teams and now in local politics. I think also being open-minded and always being willing to understand or at least listen to different perspectives, understanding or trying to understand where others are coming from. That's something that's been so important to me. When I was at West Point, I actually was doing respect for others is what it was called before it was called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was just simply respect. And that was something that I did as part of every role I've ever had in any organization. Before it was a thing that was done separate, it was just part of who I was and integrated into the work that I was able to deliver. So if I take a step back, I think it's the learning, it's the inclusive approach to doing things, and the passion around building capacity for myself and those around me.
No, I love that. So I'm going to get a little personal for a moment and you and I have never talked about this, and I so hope I won't embarrass you, but I remember, Dr. Worthy, when you and I first met, we had exchanged a lot of conversations and emails, and I remember I walked into Day and Zimmerman and I took notice of you because you just stood out. And I remember I noticed your tattoos. I think you had dreads at the time. You were really fit and built. And then when you talked and you just articulated your thoughts, you had a presence in the room. And I remember thinking, wow, I want to be like her. I really did. I mean, it was just so amazing how you were unapologetically living in the space to where you were so clear and confident about, I belong here. And as I have watched your career over the years since that time that we first met, and I've seen what you've been able to accomplish, I am not at all surprised that you are Honorable Dr. Tiffani Worthy and making such an impact in so many different communities. One of the things that we talked about as we were preparing for today before the top of the hour was just that right now is so heavy and hard for so many people. I mentioned 9/11 a moment ago. Of course, we have the pandemic that, at one point in time, I think we were starting to feel a bit confident that maybe we were coming out of it, only to discover that, nope, that's not the case. And we've even seen situations where it has increased in its intensity, and it's claiming so many lives, and it's just hard for a lot of people. And then we think about the systemic racism that continues to show forth in so many different ways. People are dealing with a lot, and it is really heavy. I also want to acknowledge that this is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and today specifically is Suicide Prevention Day. And people are struggling. I know that part of what you have articulated that you feel like your purpose is to help make positive impact on people's lives. And so I want to talk a little bit about the ways in which you do that, either by your service as mayor or even through your nonprofit. So just let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so, I think it's important that in whatever organization you're in or community you find yourself serving in, that you understand that people are facing so many different challenges. There are people who show up every day and you have no idea what they have had to survive or get through or push through to show up where you are meeting up with them. I won't forget that I worked with a colleague who was homeless, who I never knew was homeless until, many months later, who showed up every day, committed to getting the work done, and you would have no idea. And it's those types of experiences and relationships that I've cultivated over time that bring me to a point where I am very mindful of the community that I serve, the demographics, those who are affluent and those who are not even, they're not thriving, they're surviving, those who are in survival mode. And so serving as the mayor of Willingboro Township is important to me because I'm able to not necessarily put money in everyone's pocket, but I'm able to point them to the resources. I'm able to connect them to other agencies and entities, organizations that I may not have ever known even existed if I wasn't the mayor. And so it's my job to be a good steward, not just of the resources and the tax dollars, but of the information that can help other people where they are, providing that information. And then through my nonprofit, All Things Are Possible Foundation, that's like my hands and feet where I actually can do the work. In legislation, you can't really do all the work yourself. That's delegated to others, and it would be you violating some of the laws in some instances if you want to get to the day-to-day operations. But through my nonprofit, that's the hands and feet. It was established in 2007, and we have a wonderful facility serving lots of families in Burlington County, New Jersey. And so that's the hands and feet. And then if we think about the whole person, our church, the Borough Church, my husband, Reverend Dr. Carlos Worthy, is where we're able to have those conversations about people, their spiritual life, and their belief in God or not, and really be able to try to help people and meet them where they are. And so all of those things together, serving in local office, through the nonprofit, through the church, I think that, we're able to meet people where they are and help them to get to where it is they're trying to go.
I love that. And again, I want to mention the name of your nonprofit, and maybe we can place it into the chat as well for those who want to know more. But All Things Are Possible. And do you say it for short, ATAP or ATAP?
Well, I always called it the whole thing.
The whole thing. Okay.
Until the kids said they prefer ATAP. And so I said, okay.
Here we go. I know.
So
the younger generation is always trying to shorten stuff. Okay. Yes.
They have decided.
So I'm going to follow your lead. All Things Are Possible Foundation in Willingboro, New Jersey. So that's fantastic. Okay. So we're going to talk about politics for a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
So we know that politics can be a very polarizing issue around the globe in general. We see it with COVID-19 conversations and the cases that are on the rise, attacks on reproductive rights. So my question for you, Dr. Worthy, is why do you think it's important that people get involved in their communities? And why is it important to realize that all politics, in some capacity or another, they really are local?
Yes. So, I would say it's two things. One is you need representation in legislation because we are creating the laws of the land. You may say, well, it's local, it's just the mayor, but we have ordinances, we have laws that we write. You want the people who are writing the laws in your community to share your perspective, to understand perhaps your plight, to be considerate of the what ifs. And remember that a law lasts longer than that person's administration. So you don't want people coming in and just writing laws that really don't fit the community. And then the second piece of that, I think understanding how local politics are, and I would say they are very familiar. It's very familiar. You may not think so, but when you're voting at the local level, and then again at your county level, you're selecting judges. You're selecting your sheriff. You're selecting people who are laying the laws of the land. You are selecting those who are advising others. And so I think it's so important for us to take a step back and say, wait a minute, maybe I'm not in politics. I don't do politics, but I live in a community where politics determine how things are done. Funding formulas, understanding who's on your school board, what are their platforms, who are they trying to serve, who's funding their campaign, understanding all of those things I think are so important, and being an engaged community member. Go out, rock your vote, and then follow up and hold those elected officials accountable to everything that they told you they were going to do when they were campaigning. I think it's so important.
I do too. Can I say amen there? I'm going to say it. Amen. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so often in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we talk about representation and inclusion, but know that women of color are often missing from the table. It wasn't until 2020 election that we elected the first woman of color into the second highest office in the nation with the election of Vice President Kamala Harris. And I also bring a couple stats to this conversation before I address my question. But according to the Center for American Women in Politics, Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University, of the 143 women serving in the 117th U.S. Congress, 49 or 34.3% are women of color, with various of women of color serving both in state and local government across the nation. While there are record-breaking numbers of women of color in politics, Black women continue to be underrepresented. I want to understand from your vantage point, Dr. Worthy, why do you think that that is the case? And what advice would you give to women, women of color, especially Black women who aspire to serve in government?
Yes. Well, first I want to say in Willingboro Township, we are a council of 5. 4 of us are amazing Black women, and we have 1 Black male on the council. 3 of us ran together and won together. And, I think it's a few things. One, I think if the advice I would first offer, if you're interested, is to make a plan and execute the plan. I know it sounds so simple, but it's a huge step that's often missed. It's more conversation. I think I might run. I might be interested. I think I could do that. Oh, I could do what she does. But there's no plan. Make a plan, execute the plan. It starts and stops right there. Because once you write down what it is you're accomplishing and you're able to have those conversations with those in your circle, it becomes something you actually can do, and you can get other people motivated and inspired to support you in your interest to run for office. I will acknowledge, though, that there are several barriers. When you're looking at local politics, depending on your form of government, there's not much money there. There's a lot of power there, not much money. For instance, in Willingboro Township, as the mayor of Willingboro, get ready, I make a whopping $17,000 a year. Right? So when you leave private sector, you don't have to, you could do both. You can be bivocational. But if you decide to step back from private sector, which is what I decided to do when I was working for a $2.5 billion company. So I was well compensated as an executive in the company. When you take a step back and you decide to serve your community, it is a sacrifice, and it's a financial sacrifice. And so I think being mindful of what the roles require and understanding where your sponsorship may need to come from. The only way I was able to do this was the support of my husband, because there's no way. We had so many responsibilities. That is a huge barrier that people don't talk about, the financial barriers to being able to participate in politics. People talked about for many years how it's a rich person's game, and it's because it requires so much of your time, but the money doesn't follow. So then how do you position yourself where you are self-employed, where you have the flexibility to be able to earn a reasonable wage and serve your community? And it took some work, but it can be done. So I think make the plan, execute the plan, and then acknowledge that barrier of the finances and understand what can I do? How can I position or reposition myself so I can be effective in the job and do what it is that I really want to do, which is build capacity in my community.
I love that. I want to bring to the conversation some of the comments that are happening in the chat. Andrea Payne shares, who was funding campaigns is also extremely important. All of these campaigns made huge DEI pledges, but still give PAC money to candidates and elected officials who oppose the very work of DEI and civil rights. I thought that was worth amplifying. So thank you so much, Andrea. So yeah, all of that you just said was so rich. And I hope that if there's anyone with any type of political aspirations that's among this community today, that you're taking heed and you're taking note of all these wonderful nuggets that Dr. Worthy is dropping. So I want to stay on politics just for a second, and I want to talk a little bit, but talk a little bit more about the fact that when we think about the corporate sector, which you've spent a number of years working in the corporate sector, politics tends to undervalue the voice of women. So how do you navigate being a mayor in your township and having to combat both racism and sexism from those that you were elected to serve? And maybe this is also an opportunity to help educate this broader VodCast community on the Willingboro community as well. I'm not sure if we all have a good knowledge base of it.
Right, sure. Thank you. So in Willingboro, our demographic, we are predominantly Black and Brown community. It was established in the late 50s, early 60s by Levitt. It was once Levittown. It became Willingboro over time, where African Americans actually had to sue to buy homes in Willingboro. So the community that we live in today, that I live in today, was not created for the people who live there today. And in terms of really trying to have a voice and being a recognized voice, a respected voice rather, as a Black female, I think it has a challenge. There are many challenges in organizations and in communities. And the way I try to combat that and and move forward is to really listen and try to find a common ground. And I know it sounds cliche and it sounds maybe optimistic, but I have found it to work very well if I'm able to separate the emotion from the conversation and maybe where it's really coming from, and hear what is the common ground? What is it that we're both trying to accomplish? And shift the focus from me and the anger they may have towards me or the ignorance or whatever that may be, and really focus on the work at hand. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it that you want to see done? Okay, so I'm a Black female. You're not used to seeing people who look like me doing what I'm trying to do. So what? Now let's move forward and figure out the issues at hand. And I have found that to work very well in private sector. I have found that to work very well in my community, because sometimes people it takes them a while to come around to a mayor or an executive or a professor looking a certain way or being a certain way. And I think that it just underscores the importance of authenticity, and it underscores the importance of showing up as who you are so that other people feel empowered and they feel encouraged and they feel inspired to show up exactly how they are also.
That's lovely. You are inspiring us today, Dr. Worthy. Let me just say that. You are inspiring us today. So we the people, it means all people, right? Not just some people, not people that are, part of certain demographics. We the people means all people, but we see that representation continues to lag. In fact, even though marginalized communities now make up much of the population in the United States, politics continues to be dominated by white men. How can we use DEI principles, Dr. Worthy, to diversify our government? I know, big question.
It is a big question. I think that it's multifaceted. I won't try to boil it down, to one quick bullet, but I think that one of the main things is first just valuing and respecting diversity. I think sometimes people overlook the fact that everyone doesn't value diversity. They just, not everyone. And so I think that's still a tall order to fill. That's still a space that we still have to make more progress in, because diversity is not valued or respected by all. New Jersey is one of the most segregated states in the United States. And I'll just leave it there. And so I think there's work to be done in terms of just first valuing diversity. And then I think also, my mom would say, people need to just expand their interests. They need to get to know someone who looks different, thinks different, lives in a different place, eats food that they don't eat. If you are able to expand your mind and your interests and your focus areas individually, in your comfort space, in your comfort zone, you're able to do that in politics or in an organization leading from the front. But if you are unable to even eat food from a different culture, if you can't even do that, if we can't get you to go out to a different restaurant for a different type of experience in a different community, I would be challenged to think how all of a sudden you're going to have such diverse perspectives and insights and legislation and building communities and things like that. So I think that part of it is at the individual level, things that have to be done. And at the same time, at the macro level, at the organizational level, there has to be a push as well to require a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I totally agree. I placed into the chat, practice authentic curiosity. I think that sometimes we don't see it as our personal responsibility and accountability to build up our own cultural competence. And so we stay in our bubbles, right? well, we have to expand our knowledge, and resources abound right now to be able to do that. We can be much more thoughtful about who are we putting into our networks and into our circles, and getting to understand their stories and getting proximate to their issues, their pain points, their culture. And I think that in and of itself helps us to not become so offended by issues of diversity, because then our knowledge is expanded. And I think that's so important. So I'm going to invite the audience in just a second to also be prepared to unmute yourself and to join the conversation by presenting your question live, or maybe it's a contribution and a comment that you want to share with this entire community. Or if you feel inclined to just place it into the chat, we'll pay close attention there and make sure we bring your question to the conversation. But before I get there, just a few additional questions for you, Dr. Worthy. Okay. So while you were elected to represent all the people in your township, we know that not everyone will agree with your administration stance and policies. That's just the case, right? We all are different, right, and we don't want everyone to always agree. So how can leaders, both in corporate and government, learn to lead all people equitably?
I think that while we may not all share the same faith and we may not all share the same values, I think that in corporate as well as in local government, if you go back to the basics and understand what is the mission and vision, what was explicitly stated as the mission and vision for what you're trying to do and who you have been elected or selected to serve, I think is a wonderful starting point. And if diversity, equity, and inclusion are not part of the vision and mission explicitly, then you can challenge that and say, wait a minute, maybe we need to go back. We need to relook this, because perhaps some of the challenges we're having around leading equitably is because it's not written anywhere or codified anywhere where we can all be in alignment on how we're working, who we're working with, how we make selections, what we're doing. I think that for me, going back to the vision and the mission is a foundation, and it's typically a place where everyone can agree. We agree on right, the vision and the mission. And then if we can go back to, again, finding that point where we agree, then we can now go back and negotiate how we're going to go and do things. But having diversity, equity, and inclusion as explicitly stated as something that's a value of importance, of interest, of concern in the vision and mission, make it easier for you to lead more equitably and to hold people accountable when they're not.
Yeah. And, so many people will confuse equality with equity. So one of the things I heard a long time ago, and I continue to share it every chance I get, is that if equality is the hope for end, which it is, I said before, I quoted, all people should be treated equal. That's what our country is founded on. Then equity is the means to get there. And so while the two are related and interconnected, there is a huge distinction that I think serves us well if we can understand that difference. And so oftentimes people will question, well, where does the issue of fairness come in then? If we are now giving people all of these different resources to try to fit their very specific situations, then how are we solving for the question of, is that fair? Is that fair that people are getting different things? And, part of how I like to often talk about it is, people have different starting places. And so we can never get to a point to where there's full opportunity for success if we don't operate with the lens of equity, whereby we are considering, how do we now try to eliminate those barriers that causes people to not be able to have full opportunity for success? And so I appreciate you bringing, equality and equity to the conversation and sharing your thoughts on that. I want to shift now, then I'm going to go to the questions that are coming into the chat. But I want to shift now to talk about your business. You've worked in government, you of course serve as the mayor, but you also have your business, and you provide thoughtful solutions is how in which you've described your business. But I want to talk more explicitly about, what are some of those business challenges that you work with your clientele on to help them navigate?
Yes, a lot of it is related to workforce solutions, to include trainings and education around diversity, equity, and inclusion. also helping people to build, I love saying build capacity. I think that's what it's all about. Helping to build the capacity within the people in their organizations to accomplish what the leaders are trying to accomplish. Sometimes that looks like coaching sessions or executive coaching sessions. Sometimes that looks like introducing a new performance evaluation system. Sometimes it looks like proper goal setting and creating proper metrics to be able to move forward. And so I say I create thoughtful solutions because it's really about what the needs of that organization look like, because each organization is so different and they all had different starting places. So how they came to be a family-owned business versus a business, a government entity, started very differently. And so their challenges show up different. The employees that they hired versus inherited, those who shared a family name versus those who competed for the job, so I enjoy doing that type of work. I think it's important, it's meaningful, and it allows me to have an impact in with many different types of customers. And it builds a lot for me as well, because I get insight from different entities that I'm able to leverage as I'm offering different solutions that client may not have seen or considered because they're from a different industry.
I love that. I'm checking out the chat here, and there's lots of great comments that are happening. So I want to amplify a couple of them. So Vanita Green, who's part of the community today, she says, I always say in my DEI meetings that diversity is a decision, inclusion is a choice, and equity is a sacrifice. And then she, of course, amplifies the fact that many people, they struggle with that last piece, the sacrifice, right? It's like, I don't mind change. Oh, but you're asking me to change and to do something different. Ooh, didn't quite consider that, right? And so I appreciate that. Anthony Arrington, and hi, Anthony, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. But he says that he explains that equity is fairness, and it is. Equity is fairness. It's not fair if people don't have a level playing field to be able to have full opportunity for success. And I think that sometimes what also allows people to understand the difference between the two a bit better is when they can realize that it's not about giving people a hand out. It is about creating the circumstances, the environment for full opportunity for success. People still have to pull their weight. They still have to run their race, right? And so I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge some of the comments that are happening.
And Anthony, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it, Tiffany, and then we'll go to Anthony, whose hand is raised. Go for it.
Okay. So as you were speaking, what I thought about was in terms of creating that level playing field, and we talked a little bit about how important it may be to expand, your friend group and your mindset into other areas. And what I have learned from talking to many people is that they don't know personally, they don't have any personal connection to those who may not have started out in a different place. Sure. So if your friend group and your circle, your inner circle, and every adjacent circle has the same socioeconomic or community or whatever that looks like, but if it's homogenous, sometimes it makes it very difficult to even fathom how someone could start in a different place. And I know that, for me, I had to do the same introspection to be open and to understand how others' starting points are different from mine. And so I think that there's a lot of work there in that equity space of expanding our minds and our perspectives to even understand and be able to relate to what that means to start in a different space, because everyone doesn't have that.
Absolutely. I often say that where we sit determines what we see, and what we see becomes our lens. And sometimes we're so clouded by that we can't even fathom, to your point, Dr. Worthy, that others have different experiences. It's not, that's not your situation.
Right. I thought everybody had the same.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. Anthony, I want to give you a chance now to unmute yourself and share your comments or your questions. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. A couple quick comments, Dr. Nika White. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you later this afternoon on our Diversity Straight Up podcast with the IDC conference. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Dr. Worthy, thank you for your words today. I didn't know you were a politician, and I want to speak to you about that, and I want you to speak to us about emotion. I think we're in a political environment today where emotion is so high and division is so deep. I often ask many of my elders who've been involved in the civil rights movement growing up, how did you feel when you were 25 in 1965? Does it feel the same today as it did to you when you were younger? And to a man and woman, it gives me goosebumps and scares me sometimes to hear my uncles who were civil rights leaders tell me that today feels pretty close to what it felt like then. And so part of that is a political division. And so I'm just going to go there in case anybody else does it. I will. How do you navigate every day and sit next to and work and collaborate with somebody who you know is a diehard Trump supporter, for example? That's an emotional thing. And we're seeing it in our community, and I'm seeing that with some of my clients. And nobody wants to talk about that pink elephant in the room that inhibits a person's ability just to have real conversation. How are you doing that as a politician and as Dr. Worthy, as a human? How do you manage that and control your emotions and deal with that?
Right. I think for me, I try to take emotion out. Emotion for me clouds my ability to clearly think and articulate my thoughts. And I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying what I do is I try to isolate the emotion so I can focus on the issue. And often if I'm able to isolate the emotion, it will bring the energy down in the person that I may have conflict with. And what I have found in terms of those who are Trump supporters, I had a conversation earlier with colleagues about those who are Trump supporters and those who are Republicans, those who are fiscally conservative versus those who align with the values and morals and beliefs of the former president. So I think that for me, being able to understand and compartmentalize those things, because someone who says that they are a Trump supporter, some may have some assumptions about what that means that may not fit that person. And so I try not to make those assumptions and allow people to share their perspective, how they came to believe what they believe or think what they think, what influenced their thinking, what shifted their paradigm. And those things are equally important to me as, hey, I'm a Trump supporter, or hey, this is my position. I am very curious about how you came to that thinking, and if you've even taken an opportunity to take a step back. I've learned that some of my colleagues are where they are politically because their family, that's just a family affiliation, and that's what they do. And they never questioned it, just never took a moment. And until you start asking the hard questions and asking people to be more introspective, they may never have any inkling of challenging what the family has believed for so many years. So that's how I address it.
Thank you for that. I often tell my clients when I'm consulting, and I think I get a lot of eyebrows raised when I say, I will sit down and talk to a Klan member because I just want to know why you wear that hood. Where did that come from? I have to be willing to find out where that Klansman is coming from, just as well as they need to find out where I'm coming from. And that's a tough thing to do, tough thing to think about. And so thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, Anthony, I just want to, again, just thank you for the question as well. I think that sometimes we aren't as inclined to go there with these type conversations, but we need to. It's on people's minds. It's what we're dealing with. It's what we're trying to navigate. And so I appreciate you bringing the question to the fore. I often share that acceptance is not always agreement. And when we consider that, I think that it allows us to balance the emotion with the intellect as we are really showing forth and practicing that authentic curiosity to ask questions. I'm real big too on the questioning frame of mind, similar to kind of how in which you phrased it, Anthony, as well as Dr. Worthy, because we spend too much time making definitive statements and not enough time really seeking perspective and then letting that help give us a level of understanding. I'm not saying that it brings us to a point where we need to accept it as right, wrong, good, or bad, but it's just perspective sometimes. And I think that's important. So you're getting some love in the chat for bringing that question up. Apparently it's been on a lot of people's minds. So I want to go to another question now. And let's see, this is by Tori Searless. And so I want to give you a second in case you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question directly. And if after about a couple seconds we don't hear from you, I will present your question on your behalf. Tori?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Hi, Tiffany, how you doing?
Hi, good to see you. Well, good to hear you.
Good to hear from you as well. And I just want to know from my perspective, as someone who was in corporate America in a very private company and new company, where do you go to or who do you go to for resources and continuing education on DE&I, because it's always changing. There's new things coming out, but where do you start on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
I think the important thing is recognizing that it is a change. It's a changing landscape. I start with Dr. Nika White. That's Dr. Nika White and her Intentional Inclusionist book, and her other offerings that she has available are authentic spaces and places to really learn and to grow and to build a collegial relationship with her and her firm. So I think that certainly is a great place to start, and very reputable, not just because she's my colleague, but because she's put in the work, has done the work. We've worked side by side, demonstrated excellence. So that's a great place to start. And I have several different books that I have looked at over the years for consideration. There are other firms. I like to look at what articles other diversity, equity, and inclusion firms put out. Often the books are nice, but the articles, because they can come out much more rapidly in response to different challenges, I enjoy reading articles regularly. So I post them on LinkedIn, and I share what I've read there. And I think that also there's a lot of certificate programs that are available that are helpful in terms of getting more framework, perspective. There are even free classes LinkedIn offers, Coursera offers. So if you're hungry to learn and to gain those different perspectives, there's so many resources that are out there that I have found to be helpful. But I do like to stay open and understanding how things are evolving and changing, and so that I can stay relevant.
Thank you. And I want to just say, sorry, I meant to say Dr. Worthy. I want to make sure I give you that respect that you've earned. I know you a little bit, so it was natural for me to say Tiffani.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Tori. So Dr. Worthy, you are a pastor's wife, you are a mom of 3, you are the mayor, you are a business owner, and there's so many other things that I can add to that list. How do you take care of self? What does self-care look like for you that allows you to fill your cup so that you can continue at the capacity in which you do with the impact that you're making?
For me, it really is taking a step back and spending time in prayer and reflection. That is so important to me, to just turn everything off and to be able to take time to pray, to reflect. Sometimes it includes journaling and sometimes it doesn't, but I think just turning things off, and I literally mean turn them off, not passively scrolling through something or passively, going through TV channels, but to turn it off. I think it's important. My husband loosely observes the Sabbath for the family, and that shutting it down intentionally and saying yes to family and maybe no to some commitments means a lot for us as a family to be able to recharge and recommit to one another every single week. And so we don't observe this Sabbath in a very traditional sense, but we've created what that looks like for us in 2021. I think for me, I get a lot of strength through that.
So I know that I'm aware of this, and some of my colleagues are, because we chatted about it before the top of the hour. But you are not only just a mom, but you're a mom of twins and a mom of a 14-year-old. And so as you think, Dr. Worthy, about the world today, what advice do you give your children?
Show up authentically you every single day, every single time. My 14-year-old just started high school. She's decided she's a vegan. She is practicing a vegan diet, but not a vegan lifestyle. She has decided that she wants to play football. She has all these things that she's decided. And so, for me, it's important to encourage her and to uplift her and to help her to continue to figure out who she's becoming, and to be okay with it. And I think that for me, for all of Team Worthy, as we like to call ourselves, being there to support one another and to brace them for the realities, the harsh realities of the world, but don't brace them in a harness. Just make sure they have a safety net under them so that when they fall, we're there to help them, but not a harness in a sense that it would restrict their movement and dictate how they walk through the world. I want them to walk through the world authentically as they are, and we will do what we can to support them as they go forward.
I love that, y'all. Today we are getting parenting skills, we're getting politics skills, we're so much, and it's been such a rich conversation. I'm going to now turn it over to Mark Travis Rivera, who has a question for you, Dr. Worthy.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Worthy, for saying yes. At Nika Consulting, we don't take the fact that you say yes lightly. We know time is the one currency you can't get back, so we appreciate you spending time with us and our community. I'm from Jersey. I have to say that because, I go proud for my state. But, I think my question for you is, and it's around authenticity, and I love what you just shared with us. I often say authenticity is a daily choice. Show up, be seen, be who you are. When you wake up in the morning, what choices do you make to get through the day? We talk about suicide prevention month. We talk about mental health. I often say the most disrespected person in America is a Black woman. How do you take care of that? Like, how do you make the decision every day to show up authentically? What does that process look like for you?
Right. So I would start with it took time and practice being authentic, because most of my life I played by whatever rules I thought were there. Now I say what rules, what box. I mean, I create my own rules and what box. And so I would say that if I were looking at myself in 2012, I would be intentionally deciding to wear these earrings or those earrings because I don't want to signal this to that person. And, oh, my African print may be too bold. So no, maybe I need to mute it and I'll wear a gray. And is it okay to wear pants at work, or do I have to wear a skirt? Because I've been in environments where the women can only wear skirts. And so what is okay and what is not? And I went through this and I would wrestle. It would be exhausting. Just getting dressed for work. Should I paint my nails red? Oh no, what are they gonna think about red? Oh, can I get a print? Can I get tips on my nails? Can I wear extensions? So 2012, I fast forward to 2021. And I didn't have any choices to make. This is who I am. This is how I show up. And I will await to see how I'm received when I get there. And I will navigate that once I arrive. But I'm no longer willing to say no to me and say yes to someone else, because saying no to me means I'm saying no for my daughter and for her children and for every generation thereafter, because I did not authentically stand in my truth to say, this is who I am and this is how I show up.
I just put into the chat, I felt all of that, Dr. Worthy. I did every single bit of that. So we're getting close to the top of the hour. One of the things that we often like to end our conversations with is, even though we've shared and talked about a lot, I'm sure that there's much more that maybe you have a lot of passion and energy for. I want to give you just a free space to just share, what have we not talked about today? What have I not asked you about, or this community has presented in questions that you feeling a lot of energy around that you want to just socialize to this group?
I think I'd just like to underscore how important it is to say yes to you. Yes to your purpose. Yes to who you were authentically created to be. Yes to the power that is within you. Yes to all of those goals and dreams and aspirations that you have that you may be too afraid to walk into. Say yes to you. And I think it's just so important to continue to encourage people to say yes to who they are, so that we can go forward and grow as a nation, and we can grow forward in our communities and set the stage for the future generations. Saying yes to you is also saying yes to those generations who are following in your footsteps. So that's what I would like to underscore with those who are listening, to just encourage them and compel them to show up authentically as who they are.
Say yes to you. I love those words. Linvor, you had a question, so I want to give you an opportunity now to unmute yourself and share.
Thank you. I was curious. You, Dr. Worthy, spoke about talking and dealing with political differences. I'm curious of how many conversations have you been in and your approach during the conversations with those individuals? And are you seeing us doing better today in having those types of conversations? because I think that that's getting to the key to really being able to embrace someone's difference on their political views.
So I guess, Mr. Jones, it would be what we're measuring to determine if it's better. I would say for me, the frequency of the conversations have increased. I can also say that in Willingboro, because it is predominantly Democrat, the questions that we just debate, if you will, would be more about how we go about moving forward, how we go about legislation, whether we have cannabis or not, or liquor stores or not, because we're a dry town. What does the master plan, or what should the master plan look like for the town? What should the strategic plan look like for the town? The frequency of those conversations have increased, which is encouraging, because things were stale and quiet for far too long. So I would say that things are better in that regard. In terms of the political conversations, because we are majority Democrat, I don't have as many conversations in my community politically, but when I go to other communities, I'm able to engage in rich, robust discussions where we're able to share our political viewpoints and points where we align, and those where we don't.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Dr.
touching on that
Worthy.
again.
Thank you.
Precious, I want to yield the floor to you. Thanks for your question in advance.
Yes, hello everyone. I'd like to say 2 points. I appreciate it when you mentioned about the importance of keeping the Sabbath. Well, you didn't push anything. You're just saying what you do, because I do as well. We could do it differently, but I do. And I was even looking at my schedule, and there's a call later this evening. And my observation starts from Friday evening to Saturday evening. And I was like, okay, I'll be able to get a part of this because I think I want to catch it. But the point is, I'm for real. Like, I guard my time and the time I have of unplugging and being with my family, because if not, it's a rat race out there. And so that is something that definitely helps guard and keep me. The other point is when we mentioned about, I don't know, I was writing a note about systems, but I think it's important that we need to be who we want others to be, in the sense that we want others in this space of DEI to step out of the box, or to just obliterate it, to include. And yet sometimes if we're just stuck in our affinity groups, we're not doing that. You know, can you be okay with people who are, as someone mentioned about Trump supporter, someone who is a person of faith or is not? Do people have to just be like us for us to commune? And when we are able to not have that limitation, I'm speaking for myself, so much I've learned, so much I'm still able to learn, and still being authentically me. So I just think that's important, because we want so much from others and others in the system to do and be. And sometimes we are not in that space ourselves to do those things. And I think that is important. And what keeps me in focus too, as far as where my energies go, as far as getting upset and all these other things, I look at it as systems as opposed to people. I don't need to give people all of my energy as to who they are, because I recognize we're the results of some systems and some systemic thinking. So if we can address the issues that we can change, we can't change people, but we do need to change some systems. And so that is another thing that helps keep me on track. But I appreciate everything today. Thank you so much for you, and it's you too, Dr. White. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Precious. So we're almost out of time. I want to understand from you, Dr. Worthy, what's on the horizon for you? What's next? What do you have your sights on that's going to, take you to have even greater impact?
To me, it's building the next generation.
Yeah.
I am fully committed to building the next generation. I'm fully committed to helping those who are interested in political office and serving at the local or county or state levels get there, and to get the sponsorship and the mentorship and the coaching that they need, whether it be through me or through those that are within my reach. And so that's what's next for me, is to be able to build the future leaders, and to make sure that we have good, solid candidates running in each and every race as we go forward. That's important to me, and I'm committed to helping those who want to make that type of commitment. I'm committed to helping them to get there.
That is fantastic. Well, we are about out of time. I hope that you all have found this hour to be an hour well spent, and that you're not going to just, take all of these lessons and nuggets and keep them to yourself, but you'll find a way to share them with others that are in your network. We don't take it lightly that you have shared space with us, and we certainly do not take it lightly, Dr. Worthy, that you said yes to our invite. We are better off having spent this time with you, and we really appreciate it. Hope to see you all back next week, Friday. We'll be back here Eastern Standard Time, 11 to 12 noon. You can go ahead and register. If this has been valuable to you, then share this opportunity with others, and enjoy your weekend. Reflect tomorrow, 9/11. Let's remember all of those that are going to be missing loved ones. And we just appreciate each of you for joining us today. Thanks so very much. Have a great weekend.